Hello, BookTube. I've got a tag for you today on Wednesday. I meant to do a tag yesterday, and the day just didn't permit it. I had a couple of misfires, a couple of videos I couldn't upload, a couple of frustrations with work, and eventually I just ran out of time. But I saw a tag that I saw on Roz's channel, Scallydandling about the books. It's called the How Do We Rate Our Books tag. It was created by NovelleNovels. And I saw it on Roz's channel, and then the Evening Reader did it. And I watched that as well. I'll leave links to both of those videos and the original. And it's a fascinating subject. Provided we get over the, a small issue of nomenclature, it's a fascinating subject because it's all about how you react to your books, how you rate them, review them, respond to them publicly, or also privately. And I'd have to assume that 90% of the people who are watching this video also are active Goodreads users. So we're involved. You're involved in that. And also, I'm directly involved professionally. I am a professional book reviewer. So we're going to go through these and sort of discuss them. We'll get over the nomenclature right away. The nomenclature starts in the second question. So we'll deal with that and just brush it out of the way. These are really good questions for a general discussion, if we don't get hung up on terms. So the first question is, how often do you DNF and what makes you DNF? And for those of you who are coming to these videos outside of the YouTube ecosystem, DNF means did not finish. And in the bookish world, it means more than that. I've always thought that DNF also implies I'm done with you. It's not just that I haven't finished you and I'm putting you aside for later, it's that I'm not going to finish you. You have taken the wrong path. I now know you're not the book for me, so I am DNFing you. It's been my experience that that's usually what's implied here. And when it comes to that question looked at in that way, I almost never DNF a book. For two main reasons. One is that I am haunted by how many books I have read in my life that pulled things out of what looked like a fatal nosedive in the last quarter of the book, where not only did I start to enjoy it, but it also cast a better light on the earlier 3/4 of the book. I've had that happen too many times for me to feel comfortable thinking for sure the book will not do that. And the other reason is just pragmatic, which is that I read really fast. Here on BookTube, we have readers who span the spectrum. We have slow, meticulous readers. We have normal, middling readers. We have some really fast readers. I'm a really fast reader, and it's almost literally all I do. I take care of my little dog. You're dealing with needlepoint reader today, not the real thing. But I take care of my little dog, but I do errands once in a while. But other than that, all I do is read and write about what I read. So you put those two things together, a fast page count and a large amount of time to concentrate on this, I really start to feel guilty. I feel that it's insupportable to DNF a book under those conditions. Since it's all that I do, I might as well let a book, have it say. The only real type of book that comes to mind where I DNF and I DNF without any hesitation is when I'm reading some sort of tract, some sort of grifter lie book, where I read the opening paragraph, I read the first chapter, I read the first 6 chapters, and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are just going to keep lying for the rest of this book. You haven't told any true statements yet. Your book is not worthy to be reviewed. It won't be reviewed in any genre. It won't be reviewed in any venue anywhere. Peter Navarro, for instance, a coup plotter for the Trump regime, if he writes a book about being, the last American standing, I might read the first chapter, maybe the first 2 chapters, to get a sense of whether or not he's going to do anything different. But if I know for sure that he's not going to do that, this is just going to be a delusional grift from start to finish, then I won't. I'll just stop the book. I'm not under any obligation to review it, thank God, and it's not a serious thing. So unless it's absolutely noxious, which his book actually was, it's noxious enough to qualify as, I'm using him as an example, but his book was noxious enough to qualify for my worst of the year list. And if I get the sense early on in the book that this is not just bad, but horrifying, then I will probably finish it just to know. But it's something like that, right? There's one out this month, I think, a witch hunt victim or something like that. All the Trump cult people are all writing their own books about how they're the last American standing, how they are the true John Wayne. And not all of them are going to be bad enough to be worth it, if you know what I mean. So That's what usually makes me DNF a book, is that I know the author is just going to keep lying, delusionally lying to me from start to finish. But I don't do it that often. I can fly through a book, so I don't do it that often. Then question number 2 is, do you rate books 1 star? And here we have to get rid of the nomenclature. Here we have to get rid of the terminology, because I don't use stars in ratings. I don't think anyone should. I think they're dumb and reductive. Books are not toasters. I can't stand, it's been my experience that I usually can't stand the type of reader who pays attention to stars, who says, well, you know, yes, I know that you wrote an 800-word review of this book, and I know that someone else did too, and I know that it got a 3,000-word review in the London Review of Books, but I really want to just go to Goodreads and see how many stars it has and how they range. It's been my experience, not only do I hate that breakdown of a book, but I also tend to not like the kind of reader who does that. So it's just a totally reductive thing. It's not anything that I do. It's not anything that I excuse, not anything that I like. I don't want to know how you star rate a book. I want to know what you thought of it, what you thought were its good points and bad points, and what your reason is for those. I want to know how it struck you emotionally. I want to know those nuanced things, because books are all about nuance, despite what I said about the kind of book in the first prompt. Worthwhile books are all about that. Stars are useless. They tell me nothing at all. And they tell no one else anything at all either, because every person that does star ratings for Goodreads also has to publish a manifesto at 5,000 words of what their stars actually mean. Well, rather than do that, why not write a review for each of the books that you read? But anyway, once we get rid of that nomenclature, and just because the stars also mean something, right? Those manifestos that everybody posts are largely the same. So if when we talk about a 1-star rating, we're talking about a worthless book, then the conversation can flow forward, and it's fascinating. That conversation is fascinating. So the question here is, do you rate books 1 star? I don't rate books with stars, but I absolutely do rate books as completely worthless, which is surely what a 1-star book is. A completely worthless book, something that not only would you not recommend to anyone, but that you would recommend they not read. You would warn them about it. And most books are like that. Most books are like that, despite what you might see by attention-carding influencers on Goodreads or even on BookTube in the UK. Most books are garbage. Most books are 1 star or no stars, if you could give 0 stars or negative stars. Most of them are terrible. They aren't worth the pixels that they're made of. They aren't worth the paper that they were printed on. They're junk. And for me, in order to be that, the author has to be totally inept. The author has to be actively lying to you. The author has to be creating a counter-narrative to reality that you can just see right from the beginning of the book. Or the book has to be lazy, full of mistakes, full of simple errors, all that sort of thing. A lot of books are like that. So yeah, I do rate books 1 star. I don't give them stars, but I'm often called upon to call books completely worthless. Then we move on to question number 3, which is a 2-star book. And here we start to get into, again, if we dispense with the nomenclature of stars, a 2-star book is a bad book, but not a complete waste of time. So I would argue a 2-star book will have, it'll have some basic elements in place. It won't be a complete embarrassment like a 1-star book. It will do a bit of its descriptive job. The characters won't change names in midstream. There'll be punctuation and grammar, or at least basically observed it. But I would argue that although there are plenty of 2-star books, competently done, borderline, get across the finish line books, I would argue that they are also anti-recommendations, just like 1-star books for most of you. Most of you have almost no reading time at all. Almost none at all. You've got jobs, you've got kids and friends and colleagues and workouts and classes and personal hygiene. You've got a ton of things asking for your time. On top of the fact that in addition to all of those things picking and pecking at you for little bits of your time, you're also going to go unconscious at 9 at night and stay that way until 6, 7 in the morning the next day. You're going to lose 9 or 10 hours of time where you're literally unconscious. You're not doing something else. You're not doing anything. So you have almost no reading time. I would argue that a book that technically is a 2-star book, in other words, it shows up, it shows up, it says its name, it doesn't trip over the furniture, that is still a waste of your time. You still should avoid them completely. And then question number 4 is a 3-star book a good book for you? And a 3-star book is technically a good book. It's It does even more than just show up. It has a perfunctory plot. It has a perfunctory execution style if it's nonfiction. It has, if it's, like, for instance, a history of, I don't even know, the Boston Massacre. It'll be 200 pages. It won't have any errors. It'll be formatted correctly. The characters will all be historic. There won't be any howl or mistakes in it. The bibliography will be 10 books long. They'll all be secondary sources. They'll all be, the author will not have done any groundbreaking work. They won't have really understood every aspect of the 10 books that are in their bibliography, but it's there. It's a book. It's there. It's not an embarrassment to the author. And it's not technically an embarrassment to you if you read it. You can see where I'm going with this, right? You can probably see where I'm going with this. Most of you have almost no reading time. You should not be dealing with books like that at all. If you're interested, for instance, to stick with our subject, if you're interested in the Boston Massacre, it will take you maybe a tiny fraction of a bit more time to hunker down with a really good book about the Boston Massacre than to fly through a 3-star book that is merely competent on the Boston Massacre. Your time is better spent hunkering down with a really good book. So my argument would be that if something is merely competent, don't do it. Don't read it. Don't waste your time. Find a good source or multiple good sources for good recommendations of things. Go to the right recommenders, the right people, the right places, and find the book that will be worth your time. I would be honored to be one of those places for you. To give you, as I've done for many of you over the years on this channel, to give you really good recommendations so that you aren't wasting your time with the equivalent of a 3-star book on a subject, whether it's Pearl Harbor or the sinking of the Titanic, or a 3-star novel. A novel that just sort of shows up and it does what it's supposed to do, whether it's science fiction or romance or upper middle class Connecticut divorce, whatever it is. Most of the books that get critically lauded only barely show up and do the job. They are the equivalent of 3-star books. They're average. And you shouldn't deal with them. You should be looking always for the best possible books that you can read, unless you enjoy them. If it's a 1-star, 2-star, or a 3-star book, if Sally Rooney floats your boat, then go ahead. Read only Sally Rooney. Just don't tell me that you think it's a 5-star book. It's not. It's demonstrably not. All you're saying is that you enjoy it. If you enjoy it, that's fine. Anyway, we'll deal with that in due time. Then question number 5 is, what does a 4-star book mean to you? And here we come into the territory that I'm really more familiar with, mainly professionally. Because it's been my experience over the years that an editor, most venue editors, don't want to run pans of books. They don't want to run an 800-word review of you tearing apart a 1-star book in order to warn readers off it. Most of them are kind-hearted souls who have very limited amount of space in any given week or month or even day. They have very limited space to work with. And almost always the line you will get from those editors is, I would rather bury the bad books in silence. I would rather pay attention to the good books, the standout ones. And, you don't argue with an editor. An editor, they might be wrong. You might think they're wrong. You might think they're, some time-serving apparatchik or a quisling of some kind, but you don't argue with them. It's their seat. It's their section. They know what they want. So you adhere to that and don't try and make a case to rip apart a 1-star book, or, as I've had many freelancers do over the years, try to make a case to me that a 2-star book is a 5-star book, that a 2-star book is standout and deserves to be reviewed. I wasn't born yesterday. I didn't just fall off the turnip truck. I will know if you're overselling the goods. Most editors don't want that either. So it's really the 4-star books. A 4-star book does not just show up. It does its job well. Really, really well. They are rare. And they're heartbreaking for me because they aren't 5-star books. And we'll get to it about what constitutes a 5-star book. I think you all know where I stand on the subject. But I'm thinking of, for instance, what would be a good example? I should be giving examples of these things, shouldn't I? All right, well, let's say for a novel, for a 3-star book that shows up, does its job, you will probably enjoy parts of it. But its shortcomings are on complete display. No one's thinking of it as War and Peace or anything like that. For an example of that, Dan Jones's debut historical novel, Essex Dogs. I did a buddy read of it with Micah Cummins. No way that you could call that a bad book. But there's no way that you could call it a really good one either. shows up, it does the job. It is yards and yards better than what we would call a 1-star or 2-star book. It doesn't embarrass or fall on its face or do anything like that. You're not wrong to read it. But we've all read 4-star historical fiction, and it's not that. It's clearly not that. I don't think even Dan Jones would say that it's that. Whereas a 4-star book, there was a history just recently about the Assyrians. It was a soup to nuts history of the Assyrians. It was quite good. It was well worth your time. I'm blanking right now on the name of the author, but it was. I'm sure that you remember it. It's a relatively new release, not in paperback yet. It's probably still in bookstores in hardcover, and it was good. It was good and solid, thought-provoking in times, really enjoyable. A solid 4-star review. You could not call it average. The best popular history of the Assyrians in 20 or 30 years. So you couldn't call it a 3-star review. You certainly couldn't. It certainly wasn't 1 or 2 stars at all. Not beyond the pale. Those things are, I think, a genetic waste of your time. You should not indulge in them unless you love it. Unless they're just thrilling the daylights out of you. You shouldn't do it. But the thing that breaks my heart about a 4-star book is that it's not a 5-star book. That the difference between a 4-star and a 5-star book, what we're calling that, the difference between a book that is excellent but not thrillingly so, that one extra category, that difference is no longer measured tangibly, and that's heartbreaking. That is just, you either got it or you haven't, and that's why I review so many of what I would consider 4-star books, because I want them to have an audience. I want them to get reviewed. I want them to get noticed. I want them to get read. I want them to get appreciated, because it takes a huge amount of work to do that. So that's what I would consider, if we were using this, a 4-star book, is something that is quite good, that is even excellent on its subject. But there is that but at the back of the discussion. And then the next question we're gonna tease. We're gonna delay just a bit to the one that's coming, one that I'm foreshadowing here. The next question is: do you ever do half-star ratings? And that really does redound to nomenclature. That really is just a thing where we're talking literally about giving star ratings for things, because otherwise we're talking about discussion on a book. So we can skip this question. I don't do star reviews. You shouldn't do star reviews. No one should do star reviews about books. You want to do that about a toaster or a portable heating unit, go right ahead. But not a book. Not a book. Tell me what you thought about the book. Tell me where it went wrong for you, your personal reactions, your objective reactions, your clinical assessments. I want to know all of that. So half stars, I don't know how to even remove the nomenclature there and just talk about something. Obviously, that just means a nuanced discussion. So we'll move on to the big one, which is number 7. Do you rate books 5 stars often? What do 5-star books do to make them rate that high? And for me, a 5-star book is the kind that raises the short hairs, the kind that sends a thrill of electricity through. I believe that finding 5-star reading experiences is the reason we're all in this. I believe that's the reason we do this. You have abandoned your critical faculties if you start throwing around 5-star ratings and 5-star language to literally everything that you read. Again, a slight nod in the direction of UK booktubers. That's ridiculous. If you do that, you're muddying the waters for everybody. It'd be bad enough if you did that on your own in your journal, if you were just some, Cherry the cheerleader about every single book that you read in your journal. But if you do it on Goodreads, you are running the risk of leading people astray. And you see that all the time on Goodreads, where star ratings are born and where they flourish. All the time on Goodreads, you will see some book that has a ton of reviews, and a bunch of those reviews will be people saying, I have no idea why it's getting all these 5-star reviews. Those 5-star reviews led me to read this thing, and it's at most an average book. You see that a lot. And that's why the throwing around of these things is irresponsible. A 5-star rating, for me, if we skip away from the nomenclature of stars, that is the kind of book we're all here to find. The kind of book that thrills you, the kind of book that makes you lose track of time. It makes you miss subway stops or train stops. It makes you want to grab the next person you find, regardless of what they read, and say, oh my God, you have got to read this. You have got to read this. Now, that isn't always a question of quality on the page. That's a question of confidence and skill of execution, the panache of the execution. That isn't always a question of, the steepness of the quality. As simple as that. So you never know what that's going to be. But usually it has a one-to-one connection with a certain kind of quality anyway, certainly storytelling quality. And If you're being honest, that will be very rare. That kind of an experience will be very rare. I will notice. I have reading friends, of course, a lot of my friends are readers. I will notice if you're starting to have that kind of splurging, lose control of yourself reaction with a lot of books that you read. I'll notice that. And it'll charm me. I'll smile and I'll listen to you, but I have to be honest. Inside, I will trust you that much less every time it happens. Because there's some aspect of your inner estimating ability of a book that you're not in control of, not even trying to control. And I'm wary about that, like all those people in the Goodreads comment section. I don't want to be fooled. I don't want to go into a book because you've raved about it and find something that's 3 stars at best. I don't want to do that. So I'm sparing about it, very much so. That book has to have that feeling for me. It has to thrill me right out of myself. The kinds of experiences that got me into reading, that got you into reading, those experiences are rare. They might have accumulated in a lifetime of reading. We might have, thankfully, a lot of them behind us, but they don't happen all that often. And you shouldn't say that they do. So I keep it to a minimum. I don't know if I do it often. I would say probably 2 or 3 times a year. 2 or 3 times a year I will encounter a book that's like that. I haven't counted many this year. A couple. And a reread will probably decrease the enthusiasm of a couple of those, but it doesn't happen often. I mean, I read a lot more than 2 books a year, and I don't think the number's never gone above 5 in any year that I've ever been reading. And I don't think it should. If we're being honest and keeping control of ourselves, I don't think that number goes very high. I love it. I look for it. Whether you're calling it a 5-star rating or not, whether or not you're using those terminologies, in the BookTube channels that I watch for that reaction. It's unmistakable in the eyes. I could turn the volume off. I would still know if you're talking about that kind of a book. And I have to say, another reason why I love this particular neighborhood of BookTube, one of the reasons why I love it, is that it doesn't. The rest of you obviously feel a lot the same. You're not raving about every book you read. It's very rare. I'd be willing to bet that your percentages are about the same as mine, about 2 or 3 times a year at most. And some years, whole years, where you don't have that. I love that. I value it. Then question number 8 is, has your rating of books changed over the years? No. No, I don't believe that it does, honestly, for anybody. That 5-star experience that I'm talking about, where a book grabs you, it gets inside you, it electrifies you, it makes you lose the outside world, that is intensely personal. So that is not a yardstick that's going to change over time. And judging whether or not a book does a good job, if you read a lot of nonfiction, I read more nonfiction than most people that I know. I read a lot of it. And nonfiction, you know right away. The yardsticks that you're using here are right on the surface. And of course they don't change. Of course they don't. If someone's writing a history of the common soldier's experience in Napoleon Bonaparte's retreat from Moscow. So you're not writing a global history of the Moscow campaign. You're not writing a global history even of the retreat. You're writing a book about the common soldier's experience enduring the retreat from Moscow. If you have a new nonfiction book about that, and I turn to your bibliography, if you have one, and I notice that you can't read French. Well, a lot of people who survived that retreat from Moscow wrote memoirs. 90% of them have never been translated out of French. If you can't read French, then I know objectively your book is not that good. Just as simple as that. In other words, I can look at factors in your book long before I get to readability. Within the nonfiction work, I can look at factors in your book and automatically start assessing the equivalent of star ratings. I know on a whole bunch of indices that have nothing to do with readability. It's the readability, it's the magisterial theater in the round command of the subject, the connections that you draw, the inferences that you draw. That comes later. That comes in the 4 or 5-star range after I've assessed whether or not you know what you're talking about. So with nonfiction, it's a little easier to do. But even with fiction, I don't believe those standards change. An author is either in command of what they're doing or they're not. So no, I would say my standards probably haven't changed. And then the final prompt, question number 9, where do you record your ratings of your books? And if we're talking reviews, of course, I do that in public. I've done that in public for a long time. But I have a number of different venues. I review books for a number of different places. But I also have my own venues, which is a godsend. if you are a voluminous reader and an opinionated person. An opinionated reader who gets an editor who's perfectly willing to take their work but is going to strip out the opinions from it. I'm glad you made your deadline, but I'm afraid you can't be this intemperate. Not on my watch. Well, you're going to do that because you want the venue and you appreciate the book in the mail and you like the check if the editor pays, and you're not going to argue with your editor because it's their show. But that's frustrating. And thankfully, in the era of blogs and personal websites and Substacks and podcasts and whatnot, fortunately, in addition to the pleasure, even the esteem of getting an editor at a high-profile venue to take your work, we also all have that steam valve that we can just opine on our own. I have Open Letters Review, which is the successor to it's an online literary review journal. It's the successor to an online literary review journal called Open Letters Monthly that I helped to found. Open Letters Monthly existed for 10 years. Open Letters Review is going on, I think, 5 years now. And that is my venue. So, I encourage all the rest of you to submit work to Open Letters Review, but I'm not submitting work to Open Letters Review. I'm publishing work on Open Letters Review, and it's well regarded in the critical world. It's in one form or another, it's been around for 15 years, so it's well regarded. And I also have Big Canoe News in Northern Georgia, a beautifully well-designed monthly print and ink newspaper for the Big Canoe community in Northern Georgia. And it's a multi-section paper, comes out once a month. It's a beautiful thing, really worth your subscription money. And it has a dedicated book section. 2-page spread. You can just open it on the floor. A 2-page spread of books. Not regional books, and not book coverage filtered in with the art section, but just a dedicated 2-page book section, and I'm the editor of that section. So that is also my venue. My editor-in-chief trusts me, so I don't have to jump through any hoops, so that I have control of that section. So in addition to all the other answers, the normal answers for this question, I also have quote-unquote real-world venues where I can run my own work. But in addition to that, I also have the venue that I think is being hinted at in this question, which is Goodreads, where the world's readers, the Western world's readers go. They go to Goodreads to log their work, to opine about works, put a paragraph review up, to check what other people think. And I technically have Goodreads as well. I'm just not good at it. I really should be better at it. I should be on Goodreads every day. And I'm not. I really should be better at it. Because that's where the readers go. And I want to reach as many readers as possible. So I have all of those venues, but I would love to know your answers to all of these things, especially this last one, where you make your feelings known, if you do at all. I also have this, right? I have BookTube with thousands of people that tune in over the course of a month to watch these things. I don't really do formal book reviews on this channel, but I could if I wanted to. This is another venue that's entirely under my control. No ads, no sponsorships, no nothing like that. So I'd love to know what yours are, but then I'd want to know your answers to all of these things. Just keep in mind when you do, I hope you all do this. Now that Roz and Evening Reader have done it, the cool kids are doing this now. They are the definition of BookTube's mean girls. So now that they've done it, you really should do it. And it's a fascinating discussion, especially if we, sort of pry it away from literally talking about stars on Goodreads and instead talk about just the grades of how you respond critically to a book. Of course, I am fascinated by that since that's my job. It's literally what I do. So I am tagging all of you to do this, to talk to me about how you read books. And again, don't get hung up with the star business. I didn't. If I didn't, you don't have to. So just tell me about the stars represent different layers of how we react to books. That's definitely true. So tell me about those layers and where you do it and how you do it. I'd love to hear about it. But anyway, that's a Wednesday tag for you. So I'm gonna wrap this up. I could talk forever about how you review books. Of course I could. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.